real quick, there was another report that came out on because I know I talked to a lot of people and they are so concerned about the debt and the deficit. And oh my gosh, Joe Biden just exploded the debt and the deficit. However, if you go back and you try to, and I say this, try to point out to them that Donald Trump's, the debt and the deficit was double the amount of Joe Biden's, it doesn't matter. Joe Biden's way worse than Donald Trump. But it's in black and white. You could see in real numbers that the same outlets report over and over. Nope, doesn't matter. Joe Biden's still worse for me. Okay, well, you were complaining about the debt, the deficit. I just pointed out that Donald Trump doubled in 4 years what Joe Biden did in 4 years, and it doesn't matter to them. But there was a group that came out and that they compared what the debt and deficit would be and the budgets between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I found a lot of this interesting. So let's go over what they came up with. Donald Trump's campaign promises would send the national debt soaring much faster than Kamala Harris's would, per two new analysts from the Penn Wharton budget model. Both of them increase the deficit relative to the current baseline. Keeping Trump's campaign promises would increase the national debt by $5.8 trillion over 10 years, while Harris's would cost $1.2 trillion, which is nearly 4 times less than Donald Trump's. The biggest difference between the two candidates is the question of what happens to Trump's tax cuts, which are due to expire at the end of 2025. Trump would extend them, but Harris wouldn't. Extending the individual income tax cuts would cost $3.4 trillion over 10 years. Doing the same for the corporate income tax cuts would bring the total to over $4 trillion. So I don't know if a lot of people understand this, because people keep asking, how's Kamala Harris going to pay for all this stuff? How's she going to pay? The way Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and now it seems like the Democratic platform, the way they plan on paying for the stuff for the American people. And real quick, too, let's go back to a lot of people saying, we're sending all this money to Ukraine. When are we going to do something for the American people? Well, they do plan on doing something for the American people. And how are they going to pay for it? How they pay for it is they raise the corporate tax rate and taxes on the ultra wealthy. And by doing that, they take a lot of the tax money and use that to pay for the things for everybody else. That's the way it should be. Well, why should they be raising taxes on the ultra wealthy? It's not about raising taxes on them. It's about putting back where it was, because you have people like Donald Trump who continue to cut these taxes for the ultra wealthy and for the corporations. Over time, these taxes continue to get cut down and down and down. And in this report, I'm going to go over this here in a minute, Trump wants to cut them again. So the more you cut taxes for the ultra wealthy and the rich, the less American people get. And that's all they care about. That's what they want. They want more money in their pockets and damn everybody else. But you know what they'll do? They'll fool us all by throwing in stupid culture wars. So we're now fighting about that while they're all laughing at us by taking and putting more money in their pockets. That's just how it works. And if anybody doesn't agree with that, explain to me the difference. Explain to me what I said is not true. But anyway, Harris, by contrast, wants to increase the corporate tax income rate by to 28%. I believe right now it's 22%, and she wants to put it up to 28%, which would raise $1.1 trillion for the public fiscal money there. That's more than enough to pay for the cost of increasing the child tax credit to $6,000 for newborns, which she wants to do. That's another thing for the American families. For expanding the earned income tax credit, the extending the tax credit that currently exists for health insurance premiums, and for providing down payment support for first-time homebuyers. Between them, those policies would cost around $600 billion. Harris has one other very large proposed expense, however, which is raising the child tax credit to $3,000 for children over 5 years old and $3,600 for children age 5 years and younger. It currently stands at $2,000 and is set to drop to $1,000 in 2026. The policy would cost $1.7 trillion over a decade. The Wharton study concludes that the Trump proposals would increase the national debt by 9.3% above its current trajectory in 2034 and by 12.7% by 2054. The equivalent numbers for the Harris proposals are 4.4% and 7.7%, respectively. So, again, these are things that people want to ignore because we need to take sides and we need to be convinced that Donald Trump is better for the economy than Kamala Harris or Democrats would be, which is really ridiculous because if you go back and you just look at the historical facts and figures, let's go back to Reagan up until now. Reagan until now, the Democrats have created, and Bill Clinton brought this up the other day, and it is absolutely true. They've created 50 million jobs between Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Between Reagan, Bush 1, and Bush 2, you know how many jobs they've created? 1 million. 1 million jobs between those three presidents, where the other three created 50 million jobs. In the economy, Bill Clinton left office with a budget surplus. One of the only times in the history of the country that a president left another president with more money than he came in with. And Bill Clinton had to take over, a budget deficit. So he turned that deficit into a surplus. Obama had to take over one of the worst economies in the history of this country, the worst economy since the Great Depression. And what he did was, of course, he had to spend a ton of money in his first term. But when he left office, everything economically went up. Jobs, GDP growth, everything went up under him. When Trump left office, again, I will point out that when Trump left office, economically not necessarily his fault because COVID hit, and no matter who the president was, they were going to have to suffer with whatever economic damage was done because of COVID, because it didn't just happen here in the United States, it happened everywhere across the world. And since then, since Joe Biden has taken over, we had inflation rates that went up to about 9.1%. It is now down under 3% to 2.9%, which is close to the 2% mark that the Federal Reserve usually wants. However, that 2% may be a little bit higher now because Joe Biden, during his administration, that wages outpaced inflation. So he basically went through the entire COVID recovery by adding jobs, by for 2 straight years had unemployment under 4%. That had not happened in over 50 years. That was the longest run in 50 years of unemployment being under 4%. Wages were higher, and we never hit that recession. Now, I don't know if people understand the word recession. They just like to throw it out there and go, we have a recession. We don't have a recession. A recession would have required a ton of job losses and things like that. The job losses never happened. In fact, we continued to add jobs over and over and over again. For 2 straight years, unemployment was under 4%. So, this idea that Donald Trump would be better for the economy is outrageously ridiculous. Donald Trump took over an economy that was already on a trajectory of going up and up and up, and he did absolutely nothing until he put in his Trump tax cuts for the rich. And then once that happened, we exploded the debt, exploded the deficit, and now stuff like that comes back to bite us. So, again, if what I am saying is incorrect, explain to me how it's not. Explain to me exactly what policies Donald Trump put in to make the economy that you think is so great. Because I still have people arguing with me. I don't care what the numbers say. I go back and look at my paychecks, and my paychecks were much better during the Trump administration, during the Biden administration. Part of me believes that you're making that up. Some of you are. You're making that up because there's no way you went back and looked at 2018, 2019 at your paychecks and you're looking at them now. You know, and again, what was your job? What is your job that your paychecks were better in 2018 as opposed to 2022? Unless you're on commission, then what exactly changed in your job that you wound up getting pay cuts because of it? And why was that because of Joe Biden? Please do your best to explain that to me. I am all ears.